1. I have previously lived in houses that have extremely creepy vibes at night, and in which things happened a lot. Footsteps, objects moving after you leave a room, tapping sounds. The tapping sounds in particular followed me no matter where I lived, and was the only thing that felt distinctly malicious. It stopped when I lived for a time on my family's land, which we've owned since the 1800s, and has entire generations of my family buried there. My current house is an older house, which I would normally assume might be more inclined towards weirdy, haunty things. But the house has this feeling of being calm and safe from the very get-go, and on the whole, I haven't had any experiences here either. So on this particular night, I had stayed up pretty late watching garbage television. It was late enough that all my light timers had switched off, so the whole house was pitch black. I walked to the bathroom blind, and I was reaching for the light switch inside the doorway when a woman hissed, "Help!" It was so loud I dropped my phone, and I basically fell into the bathroom. It felt as though she had been standing directly in front of my face. I turned on the bathroom light, picked up my phone, and dialed 911. That's how certain I was someone was actually standing in my hallway. I said loudly, "I'm calling the police." Something stopped me from actually hitting the button. I think in the back of my mind I was doubting that anyone could have broken in without me hearing it. I'd been watching TV with the volume turned almost all the way down. There was just silence. Total, empty silence. I got brave enough to peek into the hallway, but with the light on, the hallway was even darker, and I could see nothing. I grabbed my BB gun, which looks very much like a real gun, and shouted, "I have a gun, and I'm calling 911. It sounds so stupid, but I thought someone had broken into my house and didn't know what else to do. When nothing happened, I left the bathroom and went around the house turning on lights and checking all the windows and doors. But everything was locked up tight. Predictably, no one was there. My house still doesn't feel creepy, and I don't mind the darkness or sleeping with the door open even now. It was suggested that I sage the place, but weirdly I didn't get a creepy vibe from the voice. And if she needs help, I would feel bad sending her away. Not that I know who she is or what I could possibly do to help. It makes me wonder if it's me that's triggering this stuff, not the houses I happen to be in. With the exception of my family's land, where literally nothing happened and I felt weirdly safe. Like the voice, the tapping, the footsteps, the objects moving, all of those things felt totally unrelated to one another. The only thing they really have in common is me. Is it a thing for a person to be haunted, and not exclusively by bad things, but things that feel generally, I don't know, good? I don't think it's all in my head, because my brother heard the footsteps too, and told me once that sometimes he could hear the tapping sounds coming from inside my bedroom. 2. I don't want to reveal the location of my childhood home. I didn't live in a haunted house, but rather adjacent to a haunted fire station. Bangor, California, for those curious. Some might say the house was haunted, but I believe I just got some haunted overlap from the other locations, as nothing ever happened inside my house. Here are a few of the weird experiences. The ages are my rough recollection of what age I was at the time. The most recent story happened about 20 years ago. I am 39 now. Number 1, age 13. Looked out my bedroom window at night, and I swear I saw a woman dressed in a white dress floating on the street headed toward the fire station next door, before fading out, fully disappearing, just before entering into the building wall. My parents never believed me, and neither did anybody else. For a while I started to not believe it myself. But now I know 100% it's real, but we'll get to that. Number 2, age 14. I woke up in the dead of night, hearing what sounded like a crowd of people shrieking next door. It only lasted a few moments, but it was unforgettable. It sounded like a dozen women were being murdered simultaneously. My brother and I got up to check it out, and walked on the porch. The 2 firefighters on duty were walking around with flashlights, trying to figure out what they just heard also. I didn't connect this to my previous account until later, But after this I was always weary of the station, because I knew it was real 100%, unlike before when I was the only witness. We never discovered a source. Number 3, age 16. This one's my brother's, who at the time was 18 years old. He came home really late and told me that he saw a glowing orb the size of a basketball flying just above the tree line down the direction of the highway. It didn't literally follow every turn on the highway, but due to how high off the ground it was, could be seen from most points on the highway. He followed it for several minutes until it reached the station and was hovering over top of it. He came inside and told me I had to see it. When I came out, it was gone. He still insists it was real. Number 4. There were countless stories from the firefighters insisting that the station was haunted. Some described the same shrieks I heard that night, only on multiple other nights. Apparently they were extra loud that night, probably why I heard them that time, but not the many times before. They also would insist that it knocked items off shelves regularly for them, and a couple of them experienced what they described as an indoor wind funnel, blowing violently and thrashing a room for about a minute before dying down. Number 5. Age 19. I was working on a fence outside my parents' house, and was working on the segment facing the fire department when I saw their windows shatter. Not be punched in or out, just the window sitting there perfectly. Then it just exploded in all directions. A moment later, the firefighter on duty looks out the window and yells to me, "What the fuck was that?" I told him I had no idea and came over to examine the window. There was glass both inside and outside the building, some of it as far as several yards away from the frame itself. Neither of us mentioned the ghost, but I'm sure we were both thinking about it. I've just always worried about being labeled a loon by non-believers, and I didn't know this firefighter personally. That's where my encounters end. I haven't had any more because I moved out of Bangor after that, and my parents moved a couple of years later as well. It's been nearly 20 years since I was there again, but occasionally I considered swinging by if I'm in the area again, and seeing if the current firefighters are having the same problems the old crew had. 3. It all started when I was around 6, and I visited my grandma's house in Utah for the first time that I can remember. She owns a restaurant and bar that has been in my family for 2 generations. This restaurant used to be a house built in the late 1800s to early 1900s, so it's well over 100 years old. There have been several deaths on the property, and it used to be a home, and accidents have happened. One in particular was Mr. Spargo, a banker, who came every day after work for a drink, and one day died from a heart attack on the property. Anyways, when I was little I had no idea about a lot of this history. The first time I heard about this story was when I was 9 or 10. The first time I was in the building, nothing really happened. It seemed like nothing out of the ordinary to me. That changed when I was over there, uneasily helping Grandpa as best I could set up that night's service. He had to leave and go get something from his house, which is no more than 100 feet away, so I went exploring around the building. When I entered the at the time defunct bar, the atmosphere changed. I felt that something was there and that it was pretending to be nice, but really it was the evilest thing I have ever felt, and it gave me the scariest feeling I have ever had. The scariest thing to me was that I felt that it knew I knew it was evil and was pissed it got found out. Whatever it was went away, even though I could still slightly feel it. So being the short attention span kid I was, I ignored it, and continued with helping my grandpa and left the bar. I would always come down to the restaurant after it closed and help my grandpa turn off the lights, and whatever it was, I felt that if I were to be alone there for a second, as I was turning the lights off, I would be dead. Later, when I was 6.5, we went to visit my grandparents again, and later that week we were eating at the restaurant, and I was trying to be careful with the silverware and cups as they were really nice and really old. Then I felt something pull my hair so hard, my head got pulled back a little and I dropped the cup, and it shattered not only itself but the plate as well, and everyone in the restaurant turned and looked at me. And remember thinking that maybe my hair got caught on the corner of the wall, and checked by moving my head around slowly and putting my head up against the corner to see if I could create the same result. Nothing happened. This event began what I will refer to as the 2 years of hell. When I came home, I started having night terrors so bad that I would be screaming so loud and so long, my parents would come running to see what was going on. It was not just one or two, I would have at least one every week. I have no idea what I was screaming about, as I would wake up and not remember what I was dreaming. This all culminated about 3 days from Christmas, when it finally showed itself to me in the hallway of my house, like a shadow figure with red eyes just standing there, looking at me and making funny movements. I swear I can remember also hearing a flute as well. Obviously creeped out, I kept trying to get my parents to come and see it, and it would always disappear. Yes, I ran past it several times trying to do so, and each time I got more uneasy. Finally, after my parents would not get up anymore, I just went back to bed and watched it. The moment I turned around, it jumped into my face and screamed at me. At this point, being a 6-year-old, it was more than I could handle and covered my face and hid under the covers until I was asleep. It showed up each day until Christmas, and I would cover my ears and my face each time to try and escape. Then on Christmas Day, I remember seeing it standing right behind my parents, and I pointed to it, and when my parents looked back, it disappeared. This happened for the next 2 Christmases in a row, until I got saved, and then it just disappeared. For the next 10 years of my life, I was scared. I would always cover my eyes and ears every time I went to sleep. I had to have my curtains closed and door barricaded, and had to be covered with at least 6 blankets. I finally, after 12 years, have gotten over it to some degree, and am comfortable now at night. But whenever I'm at my grandparents' restaurant, I always feel it watching me. I'm open for any questions if you have any. 4. When my husband and I first married, we lived towns apart due to work. We also had a toddler. We decided to move in together as quickly as possible and went house hunting. I've always enjoyed stories of the supernatural or paranormal occurrences, and joked about how much I would love a haunted house. I was later told by a clairvoyant that the universe delivers. We finally settled on a house that was in our price range. It was built in the 80s, so no concern of lead paint nor historic value. Everything went smoothly for the most part. Our toddler would awaken in the middle of the night and explain that her stuffed animals would move or fly. We figured she just wanted to sleep with us. Moving was a big transition for such a youngster. We got pregnant with another kiddo quickly, and he went out of country for about a week for work. Things were normal for the most part. The baby, 6 to 12-month age range, would sometimes stare at the front door and cry or point behind me when I was doing dishes. Nothing too weird. My husband returned, and I eventually decided to remodel the house. It had not been updated since being built. It was a major undertaking. My youngest was probably 2 years old at this point, and the oldest was 6. I became convinced that our house was haunted at this point, and continued to be convinced for about 2 years. It is hard to remember the times for everything, but I will describe the activities that occurred during this 2 to 3 year period. I had a dog who required medication twice daily. It would frequently go missing. I would find it later in the same spot I always kept it. One of my daughters would talk about the little boy that lived in the closet, and that she was afraid of him, so we moved the 2 girls into the same room because we felt they were lonely. This gave my husband a room to dedicate to his man cave and online PC gaming. My husband would talk about seeing a shadow dart back and forth in the hallway. I had a dream that when we took down the sheetrock, we found a secret room with dead twins who warned us to get out. All of this stuff seemed like normal occurrences that happen in life. But then I finally became convinced that the house was haunted. My children and husband were all in bed. I had clean laundry waiting to be folded on the chaise, but decided to sprawl out on the couch and watch The Breakfast Club instead. Alone time was rare. All of a sudden, a shirt flew from the chaise and hit me in the face. I ran to the bedroom, and my husband was asleep. I woke him up, and he voiced that he didn't believe me, but I know better because he got anxious and couldn't sleep. The next big event that occurred when my youngest told me there was a man in her bathroom. We had a security alarm, so I know it couldn't be true. I had her take me to the bathroom and show me. She described him as black and pointed, then stated, "He's right there. He's behind you." I told her we would just leave him alone and go about our day. We had other things happen that we just explained away. I woke up to a shadow figure hovering over my husband. My dogs would wake up in the middle of the night and bark at the foot of the bed. I would hear noises coming from the kids' room and get a terrible feeling when I would check on them. I sometimes had to walk through a cold mist to get to their room. My dogs would also sometimes bark in the hallway. I finally called someone to intervene when my husband met me at our door freaking out. I worked weekends and would always come home and tell him about my day while he played on his computer. The kids would be in bed by this time. I would then go shower and go to sleep. This night my husband said I had already been home and talked to him about my day. I then said I was going to go shower. So when he heard the garage door open and the car pull in, he immediately panicked. I was frightened to hear this as well. An entity taking my identity made me feel helpless. A co-worker got me in contact with her friend with special abilities. Her friend came over with another medium. They smudged our home and put quartz crystals in the corner. It was all free. They told me that the limestone behind us held in energy which attracts transient spirits and entities. Some are good and some are not. The Shadow Man stayed because of my husband's PTSD and was attracted to the negativity. They also said domestic abuse had previously occurred in the man cave at some point, and that was a big focus of negative energy. They taught me to smudge and told me I have ancestors by my side keeping me safe. Things would still happen on occasion after this. We spoke to our Muslim friends about it, and they thought it sounded like a jinn. These creatures are mischievous and can be good or bad. They gave us a religious artifact from their hometown that had a prayer in Arabic carved into it. We kept it on our mantle, and never had trouble after that. They would always laugh at Christmas time when we had our Christmas mantle decorations and our Muslim artifact. We have since moved, but did spend a decade in that home. 5. When I was 14, my family moved into an 18th century courthouse in Longridge, Preston, UK. It was in a very characteristic and slightly imposing area. The house sat just at the side of Dutton Manor, an occupied listed building that boasted a 4-acre spot of woodland and fields surrounding it. It was beautiful, isolated and very quirky, and we all fell in love after one visit. Nothing really happened in the first few weeks, apart from the odd sound and floorboard creak. Then around the start of November, a door in the downstairs hall started opening itself overnight. The door was to an old 4-cubicle toilet and washroom. Inside, the original cubicles and toilets were still intact. It felt and looked like a creepy room, but we used it as our washing room, and both machines were in there for our clothes. I hated that part of the house and tried my best to avoid it. A few scary things happened at the house, arguably with many possible explanations. Once I was doing the washing, I heard a creak from one of the toilet cubicles. The door opened right before me. As I stood there, absolutely shitting myself, I adjusted so that I could peek inside. As I did, the door to the toilet next to it slammed open. My mum heard the noise from the kitchen, and I ran into the kitchen to her. When I told her what had happened, her response was, "Just try to ignore it, love. Don't give it any more attention." On Boxing Day, we were having a family party. Halfway through the night, my mum burst back into the living room from upstairs, clearly annoyed. She asked, "Who's done that in my bathroom window?" Everyone looked at her confused. She asked again, getting angrier. Dave, my stepdad, stepped in and asked her what she meant. She replied, "Come upstairs." We all went up into my mum and Dave's room. My mum pointed to her bedroom window. On the glass, an oddly perfect impression of a lady's face, like as if she had pushed her face against it, but the detail of her face was what made it so strange. You could see individual eyelashes, hairs on her eyebrows, and part of her ear. The hair on her head was visible, and even the small cracks in her lips. It was so clear, in fact, that we all immediately knew it wasn't any one of us in the house. This was someone else. Dave, an ex-army meathead, stepped up to wipe it off, but it didn't clear. This lady had managed to leave her impression from the outside of the window. We all made that weird noise people make, like when you've accidentally turned the shower from hot to cold. We had no explanation as to how it got there. Margaret, the landlady, was about 75. I very much doubt she climbed the side of our house and squished her face against the window. Besides, it looked nothing like her. On another night, my parents were at work, and I was on the phone to my brother in the living room whilst watching Steve Irwin. Suddenly, we both heard loud bangs and what sounded like running from one side of the gallery above to the other side. I froze, and as I did, he asked what he had just heard over the phone. Whatever it was big, and it made the lights in the living room shake. My brother somehow convinced me to go and check it out. Logic kicked in. It must either be the cat or the small Shih Tzu dog we had, right? I opened the door to the kitchen, and directly facing it, the door to the hallway was closed. As I went to open the door to the hall, my dog made a faint yelp. She, along with my cat, were sat together under the kitchen table, and both of them were staring at the kitchen door. My heart burst into my throat, and I told my brother both animals were there. Just as he went on to explain it might be the wind, we heard the banging upstairs again. This time heavy footsteps went from left to right, toward the hall and stairs. I ran down into the living room and through to the study, towards the front door. As I went to open the door, I heard the bangs in my bedroom above. My brother shouted down the phone for me to run. I ran across to the manor, frantically waving my arms about to try to trigger the motion lights and not looking back. The portable house phone lost its coverage, and my brother disconnected. I was alone and terrified. There was definitely something that ran down the length of my house that night, and my brother heard it also. All doors were locked, windows were closed, and both pets were in the kitchen. I banged on the door of the manor and woke the landowners up. They invited me in, comforted me, and called my parents at work. Dave came home half an hour later, searched the house, and found nothing. Another night. My mum, stepbrother, and I were all sat watching TV in the living room. The door to the kitchen was shut, and my stepdad was down in the study putting clothes on the radiator. We could all see one another due to the design of the house, but we were paying attention to the TV and not to him. "Oh, hi, Thomas." Not really taking it on board, we continued to watch telly. Dave walked back into the living room. My mum clocked onto him first, stood up from her seat and went towards him. "What's the matter?" she said. I turned and saw Dave's face. He looked white, and he was clearly shaken over something. The man of the house appeared petrified. For us it was disconcerting to see a man who up until then had never been scared of anything. I mean, I once saw the guy grab a wasp in his hand and throw it out of a window. He was a beast. According to him, as he lifted up his head from putting clothes on the radiator, an old man walked right up to the window, which was above it. Initially, he thought it was Tom, our landlord. The man had a brown hood covering his head and appearing to walk hunched over, like Tom did. At the minute Dave saw the man's pale grey face, he knew it wasn't Tom. He had to do a double take as to who he was looking at, but when he did, the man had gone. Now, I know this sounds ridiculously far-fetched, and if it was anyone else who saw it, it might have been, but Dave was as straight as they come. He had already heard enough about our experiences, because up until that point he hadn't seen or heard anything that he couldn't have explained. He certainly did that time, and maybe this was a factor as to why both of them decided it was time to move again. Many other things took place at that house, and far too many to write them all on here, as this is already long enough. But perhaps the most terrifying thing that ever happened, or has ever happened to me, took place about 2 weeks prior to us moving out. The night I actually saw something. Me and my parents had fallen out. I had been shooting my air rifle in the house, and one of the pellets had stuck into the skirting board. It was about 9:30 in the evening and pitch black outside, so in a bid to freak them out, I pulled out the sulky teenager stunt. I marched toward the door, grabbed my maglite torch, and walked out, slamming the door behind me. That'll show 'em. I walked past the manor house, and all the security lights switched on, following me in unison as I made my way to the front of the house. The house had a huge lawn at the front of it, and to get to it you had to either walk down 2 sets of steps or down the grassy hills to the side of them. I walked down the grass hill and slumped myself down near the bottom, close to the lawn. The censored lights illuminated the entire lawn, and at each far side the wooded area lurked in the shadows. The lights clicked off, and it was pitch black. I couldn't see the woods. I couldn't see the lawn, and as I turned to look up at the house, I could barely see that either. I was freaked out, but still angry and stubborn enough to sit there on my own still. My mum or Dave would be out soon looking for me, and that thought comforted me somewhat. I clicked my mag light on and shone it across the field. My torchlight made it all the way across to the other side of the lawn. I put the torch between my knees to hold it and pulled out my phone. I started a game of Snake when I heard a noise. It sounded like the snap of a branch. I didn't pay too much attention to it, but I definitely heard something. Then another noise came, but this time it sounded closer. I looked across the dark field to see if I could make anything out. I didn't want to use my torch as I didn't want to freak out. Then I heard what sounded like grunting, almost like a pig. I grabbed my torch and shone it directly in front of me. This time the light didn't make it to the other side. There was an obstruction that wasn't there before. In the middle of the field, blocking my torch's path, was a tall figure standing mid-stride, perhaps frozen from the light. It was black, and its eyes reflected the torchlight similar to how a cat's eyes would. I stood bolt upright and immediately took my light away from whatever it was. I turned and started walking up the hill, saying to myself, "Run, Kyle, you need to run." The grunting sound happened again, and it sounded like it came from where I was just sat. This time, without hesitation, I sprinted back up towards my house. All security lights came on, but I was too scared to look back. I had seen something I had never seen before, something that was a lot bigger than I was. I ran into my house and straight to my mum and Dave. I was in tears, and to this day my mum still says she has never seen me look as scared as I was then. It was horrendous. I had goosebumps reliving that and writing it down. It was an experience to say the least, and even years later I struggled to rationally explain much of what happened. I welcome your thoughts. Thanks for listening. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 119. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, first paranormal of the new year. Well, while I've been recording these stories, I like to take little breaks in between each story. Kind of rest the old voice and then start the next one fresh. That's how we do it. That's how I do it anyway. And so when I'm doing it, I usually watch something, be it episodes of QI or some Craig Ferguson stuff. Today, and for the past couple of days, I've been watching basically muscular men buy groceries. It's not a fetish, just in case anyone's wondering, but it's the kind of thing where, hey, this is healthy eating on a budget, that sort of thing. So I came across this channel, a couple of brothers, called Buff Dudes. They both look like Thor to various degrees, and their stuff's quite funny, so that's quite good. Just thought I'd give them a little bit of a shout out. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.